Yeah, that a little better. All right, so recovering from disaster recovery. So first of all, we're going to kind of go through the basics. What are the disaster recovery elements? I'm going to present a scenario similarly based on what I went through a few years back, and then touch on more specifically what actually happened. And then since we start with the elements, I want to go through what happens when you are missing elements from a disaster recovery / business continuity plan. And then, of course, closing remarks, questions, dad jokes, whatever y'all want. So, disaster recovery elements. Oh, and I like to throw in financial advice. Nothing protects you from identity theft quite like a 350 credit score. Trust me. What is disaster recovery? So the textbook definition, or I guess depends on where you get it from, is an organization's method of regaining access and functionality to its IT infrastructure after events such as natural disaster, cyber attack, and other types of business disruptions such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Yes, kind of. Actually, that was lab generated. So every solid disaster recovery plan has 5 critical elements. You have your disaster recovery team, basically the people that make this work. You have full-on business risk evaluation. You have to identify your business critical applications and assets. You have to have backups, and you have to test and regularly optimize, test and improve.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Question with that the identification of assets, what's processing, where to do your BIA, your RTO, or was that in hit?
Yeah, a little bit ahead, but yeah, that's very much a part of it. So I'm going to break those down a little bit more here. So starting with the team, it's basically a group of specialists who are responsible for creating, implementing, and managing the disaster recovery plan. Each team member should have their own defined roles and responsibilities, defining, basically partly a segregation of duties, partly, who's going to be making decisions, so on and so forth. And, a common misconception is, well, the senior leadership team, the SLTs, are going to make all the decisions. If they know what's best for them, they're going to sit down, shut up, and just stay in their seat. In the event of disaster, this DR team should know how to communicate with, number one, each other, other employees, vendors, customers, the executive team, potentially a board of directors. And as I mentioned, I got a little bit ahead of myself. Leaders, you need to stand aside and let the disaster recovery do their job. So I do apologize if my text is a little bit small. I should have, tested that a little bit beforehand. But so for risk evaluation, basically what you do is you assess potential hazards that put the organization at risk, both before and during the disaster. So this happens at multiple times along, the path. You strategize what measures and resources are needed to resume business operations. And then moving on to business critical asset identification. You need to have documentation. You need to have a lot of it. You need to have it in places where you can both access it online and offline. You have everything in SharePoint and you lose SSO, like somebody asked earlier. How do you get access into it if you can't log into SharePoint? So it's always critical to have a copy of your most recent disaster recovery team offline. It's also imperative to identify, which systems, applications, data, and other resources. Those resources could be your vendors. They could be, other support teams, third-party, investigators, or anything like that you need to come in and assist. You have to know how to get a hold of all of them. Documentation should be very low level, step by step. Take me through the numbers as if I've never done this before. You're going to need to do that to be able to recover the data in the systems, especially because whoever's going through it probably inherited it from somebody else and may not know the systems. I've walked into an environment before where, it's like, I don't know anything about what's going on, but I fell right into a disaster. So it helps to know what needs to happen and when. That also has to document not just what's critical, what the assets are, but also what the dependencies are. Because, if Active Directory is, or your Entra ID is critical, but what is it dependent on? It could be dependent on SSO to log in. It could be dependent on, some other form of, access or whatever else. So moving into backups, an effective backup plan determines which systems of data need to be backed up, who should perform the backups, how they're implemented. Most people have a backup solution in place, but what a lot of the backup plans do not account for is what happens when your backups are out. How do you have backups of your backups? Do you have cold storage? Do you have things like that? So these are plenty of factors that definitely need to be considered. And as you mentioned, your backup plan is going to have recovery point objectives, recovery time objectives. So the recovery point is, what is the frequency of backups? Are you doing this, kind of in a rolling hot state, backup, or do you, back something up every night at midnight? If you're doing, financial transactions, millions of dollars a day, you're probably going to need something a little bit more real time instead of, losing, 20 hours worth of financial data and records and things like that. Recovery time, basically, how much time can we survive if this thing goes down? Like, how fast do we need to be back up online to start conducting business and stop hemorrhaging money? These directly impact the strategy of the disaster recovery and the amount of downtime the organization can handle. And testing and optimization, most people will say do it every year. I am more of an advocate for do it every 6 months. Quarterly is just an exercise in absolute futility, and nobody has the patience or time for that. Tabletops are quarterly, but disaster recovery should at least be twice a year. I know plenty of companies that do, they have 2 hot sites, and every 6 months they do a hard cutover to simulate a disaster and see what happens, what goes down. Do the firewall rules kick in? Did we forget to update rules on this one? So on and so forth. But they test it so they can keep optimizing and making sure the next time they cut over, we have, fewer and farther between problems. Allows them better time to also tune their tools. Security tools need to know what's happening. When they see, logins detected because you're using, the AWS West Cloud or something like that, or you're using, the Western region of the United States for authentication, and then you cut over and all of a sudden you're, everybody's authenticating from the East Coast because that's where, the logins for Azure or whatever are being redirected. You get a whole bunch of alerts saying, hey, this is impossible travel, or hey, this user logged in from here and 5 minutes later they're logging in from over there. So it helps to tune the tools to be prepared for this stuff as well. So financial advice part 2, borrow money from pessimists. They don't expect to get it back. All right, quick show of hands. Who has actually participated in a live disaster recovery, like 2, 3, 4, real time, 5, 6? Yeah, real time, like not simulation. Like, okay, we're running out of business here. All right, it's about what I usually get, about maybe 5 to 10% of the room. So I'm going to go ahead and present a little bit of a scenario. Just imagine you're a CISO, even if you don't know what it's like to sit in that role, just pretend for a minute, or a CIO. You're in charge of the whole cybersecurity program. I'm sure every one of us knows how we would run a program if we were at, that high ranking. But, as you get higher in the management and leadership chain, your vision changes a little bit. But just for the sake of throwing out a unique perspective. Mm-hmm. You have an infrastructure of just over 30,000 endpoints, about 15 to 20,000 users. The other 10K or so is, servers and VMs, Docker containers, things like that. You have a very small team of cyber professionals, about 12 people in all of cybersecurity. And when I mean that, I mean your engineers, your analysts, your management teams, operations people. I'm not talking about GRC. You've probably got 50 of those. You contract 3 or 4 different managed service providers to manage most of your IT, your network stuff, your security infrastructure. The security tools and systems are basically awarded to whichever MSSP says, I can do this cheaper. And then it begins. You get a call Sunday morning, 5:30, haven't had a chance to, wake up and get ready for church yet. Instead, you're getting a phone call from your SOC manager who just tells you that applications and services are failing across the enterprise. Databases are unreadable. A couple of users have already reported strange extensions on all their files, which indicate they can no longer open. I don't know who's checking their files at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning on a Sunday. They're really dedicated to their jobs, or they're exfiltrating something. That too, potentially. And they tell you it looks like a ransomware outbreak. I'm sure we all kind of figured that out by now. What do you do first? Feel free to pitch in. What would you do?
Pull the plug on everything.
Pull the plug on everything? Start talking to other leaders? Who remembers one of the first 5 elements? Bring in the disaster recovery team, right? Yeah. They're the guys you call when this type of stuff, hits the fan. Oh, wait, we don't have a disaster recovery team. I'm not kidding. This happens. Let's take a closer look. Let's go back through what I had already set up. You have an infrastructure of just over 30,000 endpoints, 15 to 20K users, right? At least you have backups to recover from. Actually, no, you don't. The ransomware took them out too. So what do we do now? Honestly, the only thing you can do at this point, while the FBI is not going to tell you one way or the other what you should do, they're going to wink at you and say, pay the ransom. And that's pretty much what you do at that point. You have a very small team of cyber professionals, about 12 or so, defending your company. A team that small struggles to keep their heads above water just managing day-to-day current security projects. Half of them are probably involved in, 3, 4, 5 different, we're implementing this tool, we're taking that one out, we've got a SOX audit, we're going through, PCI DSS audit on top of this. They're absolutely slams for a company that size. Disaster recovery is a luxury they have never had. They don't have the time, manpower, or the budget to afford it. This pushes everything onto the backs of the MSSPs. But hey, we've got 4 of them, right? 3, 4 of them? No, there's no rhyme or reason to how the distribution of responsibilities was assigned whatsoever. You could engage 3 different MSSPs to make one simple change. Has anybody ever worked with multiple MSSPs? Do they play well in the same sandbox? Nope. I'm not letting them touch my systems. I manage this, they can't have it. I'm not configuring this because I don't trust that they're going to send me the right configuration, or I don't trust their API key that may have too many permissions. That sound like an MSSP to you? Yes. I worked for a company one time where the MSSP wouldn't give me access to the tools that I was paying for. That's how bad they can be. And of course, when you have all of your infrastructure spread across 3 to 4 different MSSPs, no one has the full picture. They don't know what's happened outside of their purview and their scope. So really, they're not going to be much help in this case. But what they are going to do is say that we're the ones that should lead this disaster recovery effort. Pay me.
Yeah.
And in fact, they can get downright cutthroat about it. They get nasty. So let's touch a little bit on my experience and also give you a little bit more financial advice. Take out a mortgage from a bank, and you'll spend the next 30 years paying it back. You rob the same bank, you'll be out in 10, and you'll have enough to buy that house in cash. So if I sum up what I saw when I actually did my ransomware recovery efforts in a single word, chaos. Infighting was happening across the organization, across the MSSPs, everybody pointing fingers. This ain't my fault. I told you so. Yada, yada, yada. It gets bad. I literally sat in the conference room while we had people shouting at each other across the conference table while there's executives on board and outsider, vendors and whatnot. They're constantly shifting priorities. Oh, this is the most critical thing. We need to get this on now. And an hour later, it's like, oh, no, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Forget I said that. Let's do this here because, again, no plan, no idea what to do. Something gets stuck in their head. Oh, that sounds important. And they jump on it. They pounce. They do not think more than 5 seconds ahead of their face. Absolutely gaping mistakes being made during the recovery efforts. Resource depletion. And when you got a small team and everybody's working and you bring in your MSSPs to help out, it's still, they're long days. It's hard. And everybody's cycles get spent. People start, stop being able to focus. Who's ever worked more than a 16-hour day? Yeah. How do you feel at the end of that?
Brain dead.
Yeah, brain dead. Yeah, it's the best way to sum it up. You got vendors on site selling new products and services. Hey, they just got hit with ransomware. Their cybersecurity budget's going through the roof right now. And they're in the war room, no less. They're not like outside hanging out or anything. They are in the war room where we are actively trying to recover. And they're saying, hey, our products can help with this. It's like, I don't have control of the budget. What are you talking to me for? I don't even work for this company. I'm just here to help. MSPs making significant changes without collaborating with each other or with the company they are supposedly trying to help recover. They started making changes and all of a sudden it's like, what happened? Why isn't this working? And, we made that change like 2 hours ago. And of course, that change caused 10 other problems that now we have to dig through. And of course, burnout. Pretty much expect to do that after about day 3. Security measures and best practices are sacrificed, thrown out the window to minimize RTO, which they don't even have a documented RTO, but they're just trying to get that recovery time. They're trying to get back to operations as quickly as possible without knowing quite exactly how to do that. So they're throwing best practices away. We're going to do shortcuts, all that stuff. So my experience, it's conducting a situational analysis. I get alerted, about Monday afternoon, day 1. This was about day and a half, I guess, after, about 36 hours or so after, that they found out. And I was working for one of the MSSPs at the time. Don't hate me. And I found out about Monday afternoon. I'm like, Corey, man, send me on this. Like, I want to be there. I want to help. Just send me out there. Fly me out right now. It's like, I will buy a plane ticket right now. He's like, all right, hold yourself there, killer. CrowdStrike and the FBI were already on site conducting forensics. Mind you, this is still day 1, and they were on carbon black. CrowdStrike was already on site throwing carbon black to the wolves. So, yep, I immediately offered to fly on site. But this was during a pandemic, so here's where the fun came. I received the order on Wednesday at about 6 p.m. Hey, all right, we need you on site. Go. Like, all right, yeah, I'll book a flight. Oh, wait. Don't do that. You can't fly. Why the hell not? So here's the thing. They won't let you in the data center if you have used any form of public transportation over the course of the last 14 days. You're kidding me, right? This is a prank. Apologies.
It was
So I get the order about 2.5 hours later. I kiss my wife and kids goodbye. I'd already packed the bag. I start driving at about 8:30 p.m. Stop in somewhere in Missouri or whatever for the night. I get about 4 hours of sleep. I get called again after I'd been asleep 4 hours. Said, "Hey, how soon can you be on site?" So, well, I'm awake. I'm heading back. So I made it to Chicago. A little bit after 6 p.m. on day 4 after driving 1,000 miles, and that's, I would say, less than 24 hours. That's impressive. So after I arrive on scene, I meet my liaison. I'm introduced to company leadership. They get to know who I am, what I'm capable of, what my skill sets are. I get the latest updates and plug in. I worked for 31 hours at that point, straight. So you thought 16 hours was bad, try 31. By the time I finally got out of there, I was so dead I could barely drive to the hotel without passing out. So while I was there, after I kind of got a little bit of rest and came back the next day, well, actually even during that first 31-hour shift, things that don't get considered, your basic needs, logistics. Did anybody order food? I haven't eaten in 12 hours, man. I'm starving here. And then, after day 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, it's like, seriously, Mediterranean food again? Do we have any other options here? So, I mean, it's just this is going to be simple. We're going to do what we know works. And, they didn't put a lot of effort into thinking that out. But as part of your disaster recovery and business continuity plans, you have to consider this stuff too. A lot of people don't think they incorporate that into their DR plans. The ransom ended up being paid around day 6 when they realized that there was no hope of recovering their files. Time management, prioritizing tasks, conference bridges, things like that. So I did 16-hour days after that first 31-hour day for 2 weeks straight, no day off. The days did get a little bit shorter about halfway through the second week, but there were plenty of times where I was, sitting in a conference room. I had an earpiece in, listening through another conference bridge for operations and things like that. So it was absolutely hectic at times, and trying to pay attention to both at the same time is a skill very few people get to learn. But if you ever get a chance to do it, it'll make you pretty valuable pretty quick. Lots of times with way too much to do at once. Like, I have to do this, I have to focus on that, I have to push the decryption packages to this batch of servers, so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden, now that I got all that stuff done, I'm like, all right, I got all this stuff done. What do I need to do next? Just stand by for a little bit. I'll stand by for an hour and a half. It's like, I got a nap, And then, yeah, it's like, no, we still don't have anything for you to do yet. So just hold on, just stand by, killer. I got to learn a bunch of stuff on the fly and also chase the rabbit. It's not like chasing the dragon, no drugs involved. But it's more like the Alice in Wonderland, follow the rabbit down the rabbit hole and see where this takes you. You ever, say, all right, once you log into the server, you can run the decryption program. It's like, okay, I can't log in. Oh, we have to push a patch to it or something like that. Or there's a back end way to log in because we don't have the local credentials for that machine, but there's a way to recover the password. And then after I, push a patch or something, update it, and then all of a sudden I get some error message that I've never seen in my life before. So I have, because I can't use corporate Wi-Fi, I have to use my mobile phone. How do I get past this error message? And then I, go through the forums and, God knows how people ever figured out how to get through some of these things with Microsoft is amazing, but you're diving through that rabbit hole. Finally, I clear that error message. I try logging in. Boom. Completely different error message. It's like, oh, great, this again. So I got to go down that hole. And then when I get down there, it says, all right, this is what it needs to happen. I can't do that from this interface. How do I do that without being able to do this, directly from, the computer interface? I mean, it got nasty. Like, I've been through some rabbit holes before, but that one, some of those took the cake. Learned all sorts of interesting stuff about Windows internals, little known AD quirks that, people have never had to deal with until they've lost access to their AD infrastructure. Learned new security tools along the way. It was actually the first time I got exposed to CrowdStrike. And Nexus switching, we had to re-architect the entire network because it was a pretty open network at that point. So now we had to do micro-segmentation to make sure, there's not some residual effect that's going to pounce on the Active Directory server we just recovered, and then is now our critical AD server. So now we have to make sure nothing can get in except absolutely authorized traffic. We had to re-architect the redundancies in the network. And I've never done that with Nexus switching. I've got a network engineering background and a lot of Cisco stuff, but I never actually played with Nexus before that. So got to learn that along the way. Constant legal considerations. At least once or twice a day, I had a call with my company's legal saying this, that, don't say this, don't say that. I know it's probably the truth, but you can't say that. You have to be very careful what you say in any, electronic communications, even if it's internal to our company, to your boss, or to the other team members, because this is all going to be subpoenaed. You can count you can just count the days.
You have legal counsel that actually understand what's going on?
We had legal counsel. And they weren't on site or nothing like that. They were calling from, wherever else they were located. But yeah, so, electronic communications, when you're in a situation like that and you're a vendor, if something goes wrong and they find you to be at fault, they are going to come after you to recover their money, and they're going to blame you for it. So yeah, we had to walk on pins and needles. Even if I had to say, your architect is an absolute moron, which I wanted to. I couldn't say that outside of speaking it in a closed room with only people that, I knew. We found security gaps everywhere, things that were never documented, things that people didn't know about, things that people put a pin in 3 years ago. It's like, oh, oops, I forgot about that. We were all sharing the same local admin account and password for everything. It was a domain admin, and it was given to everybody. How many of you think any of those logs were being monitored or going to a SIM or anything like that? Nobody? Yeah, good. You would be right.
And it's what wouldn't matter.
Yeah. So let's just document it while we're here so we can come back to it later.
I think a company looks at
15 to 20,000 users, 30,000 devices.
dollar-wise.
Dollar-wise, they're a global insurance company.
Okay. That's all for the thing. Hey.
I got thrown under the bus by a vendor or two, the other MSSPs. Oh, they loved pointing their fingers. And man, you make one mistake, they'll never, ever, ever let you. It's like, I learned something from it. Don't get me wrong. I'll never make the same mistake twice, but man, getting thrown under the bus in front of the CIO and everybody else there in the executive team, that does not feel good. I learned PowerShell automation. Who likes PowerShell automation? Two people. What is wrong with you? PowerShell is horrible. It's so wordy. It takes like 10 lines to do one command. I did get to network with some absolutely, truly awesome people. Some of the people I met, the cybersecurity team, I'd worked them a little bit before on projects here and there, but I never got to know these people. It's like, all right, I'm sorry. But they were some of the salt of the earth, most amazing people you'd ever meet. And still to this day, we call each other on a regular basis. Just shoot the breeze, see how we're doing. I made some great friends out of that. Reflected great credit upon my team, my company. We all did a fantastic job, I think, all things considered, because we had no DR plan, no DR team, nothing. None of those 5 elements we had. We strengthened the customer relationship, obviously. A very large wave of very grateful emails from client leadership, from my own company's leadership, operations teams. I still have a folder where I have every one of those emails. So if anybody ever needs a reference to know exactly what I'm capable of and what I do in a crisis, I have that to show. And I wish more people would let me bring them to job interviews. I should just be my resume. Just unzip that folder and read those emails. That's my resume. And yep, you definitely get to pad the resume with that kind of stuff because, like I said, 5, maybe 10% of the people in here have actually participated in a live, real world, this is not a drill, ransomware, or just any type of major disaster recovery incident. The people that know how to do this are a very rare find. And if you find them, you hold on to them and you let them help you build and perfect your DR and business continuity plan. They are absolutely going to be critical to your organization someday. Take good care of them. So now we get to touch on the impacts of the missing 5 elements. And last bit of financial advice, part 4, saving for retirement is not necessary if you win the lottery. In fact, everything you were going to dump into your retirement, dump it into the lottery and increases your chances. No, seriously, don't do that. Michael, 4 minutes? Okay, I'll make it quick. So if you're missing a disaster recovery team, you've kind of gotten the idea, no one knows what to do. Different members of this senior leadership team are going to prioritize different things. The CFO wants to make sure they can collect revenue. The chief communications officer or the public relations officer wants to be able to get the website back up and let the customers know, this is what's happening. You may not be able to make payments yet. Everybody has a different priority, and it's critical. It's all critical for their job, but it's not critical for the company in a lot of cases. Infrastructure and ops teams are pulled in way too many different directions all at the same time. And the teams on the ground become ineffectively utilized. As I said, lots of times where I had too much to do and then times where I had nothing to do. Significant communication gaps. First of all, they didn't really know how we were going to communicate without being able to access Teams. So they bought Zoom licenses, but they had no Wi-Fi. So, they quickly created a makeshift Wi-Fi that was straight open to the internet, but still gave them, access to the company. I'm not going to go into any more details on that one. Vendors and customers become an afterthought in communication, and they're some of the most important people you have to communicate with. Without this, risk evaluation. Without this all starts to happen as part of your disaster recovery effort, and it wastes hours of valuable time. The official strategy at that point, just get everything working. Without knowing what your business critical assets are, it's easy to overlook critical applications and data that's not documented. Sometimes you have critical data that you don't realize is critical until somebody speaks up and points out its relevance, and all of a sudden, you got some, C-level executive saying, oh, no, we need to deal with this. We need to get that handled. And all of a sudden, everybody realizes, okay, yeah, that's kind of a big deal, and why didn't we think of this yet? So even then, it's not easy to effectively communicate the criticality if it's not already documented. Because there are people that probably had things that should have been dealt with sooner, but they didn't know how to communicate. Why is this important? So constantly shifting priorities and resources. Critical systems are in unfinished recovery states because a resource got pulled to do something else. For backups, even if you have a backup plan, it may be incomplete, and chances are it was the only thing that's probably going to still get thrown to the wolves anyways. But a lack of an RPO and an RTO makes it very difficult to prioritize recovery from backup. So you got, 30,000 endpoints, but which ones are, hosting your critical databases, your critical financial applications, your web applications that, need to collect payments from customers? Where are those? How, what are the dependencies? You don't know how quickly you need to get things up. You lose sight and you miss things. Different types of backups have different impacts on recovery. So, cold backups are the least likely to be impacted, but takes a much longer time to reach your RTO. Hot backups, faster recovery, more likely to be compromised for a malware incident or ransomware. If it's natural disaster, you're probably going to be okay. Without a backup plan, expect to triple your downtime just for starters. That's probably really, really being generous about it. That's probably going to be way more than triple. But If you want to be up in a week, it's going to take you a month. Testing and optimization. If you are not regularly doing this, even if you have all of the other 4 elements, the lack of testing and optimization has a direct impact on RTO and RPO. The plan will be significantly out of date. New critical systems that were brought in to replace something else is not identified. It's not documented. It's never been tested for failure. Decommissioned systems are still in the plan. So when you go, oh, we got to find this system here, and you spend 4 hours searching for it only to realize, that's right, we took that out 2 years ago. So changes to business critical assets are not documented. Communications are impacted. You may have, Zoom or something like that specifically for this, or, something like that. And that's like, oh, we got rid of Zoom a year ago. Again, it's, if it's not current, everything gets impacted. World events are also generally not considered in a lot of testing and optimization plans, such as COVID-19. So address things like that you wouldn't necessarily expect. Security tools, not optimized for forensics at that point in time. And in closing, my actual real piece of financial advice, seriously, folks, invest in and test a disaster recovery solution. You can actually take that one to the bank. Questions? Go.
You mentioned you think company paid ransom after their tips get back. Or how does
They had an online presence within about 2 weeks. They were still unable to collect payments for about another week after that, but they were basically back to about 90%. Fast walking, slightly jogging operations within about 4.5 weeks.
the granddads didn't get this?
Yes, they actually did. It's in their benefit to actually give the decryption program. That way they, when people know, they'll actually give it to you when they know which ransomware group it is. It's in their interest, because if they stiff one person, one company, that's getting out. It's like, don't ever trust them. They're not going to give you your software back. A couple other things, just, different statistics. Colonial Pipeline paid $4.4 million in ransom in 2021. JBS paid $11 million. Caesars Palace paid $15. CNA Financial paid $40 million. And just last year, an undisclosed Fortune 50 company paid $75 million in ransom, which is the highest to date. That doesn't count the costs from the loss of business operations. Alternatives, cyber insurance. It's nice to have. They might even pay. But if they find out that, you shirked your responsibilities and left an admin server without multi-factor authentication, watch how quickly they decide, we're not going to pay you. You didn't do your due diligence in securing your environment. They're like that. Read the terms very closely with your cyber and legal teams in the same room if you are going to do, count on cyber insurance. EDR, NDR, XDR, whatever, asterisk DR. Any seasoned hacker will find a way to bypass it if they really want to. I love the "it won't happen to us" scenario, because I don't know how many companies still do this, but there's a lot of them out there. Lol. Thank you.